Have you ever wondered what makes the Lamborghini Countach so legendary? You probably think you know this iconic supercar, the poster on every kid's bedroom wall in the 80s, the wedge-shaped beast that defined what a supercar should look like. But what you didn't know is that the 1985 Countach 5000 QV hides secrets so bizarre they'd make even seasoned car collectors do a double take. In the next few minutes, you'll discover 20 weird facts about this Italian masterpiece that will completely change how you see this automotive icon, including one fact about how owners had to drive it that's so ridiculous you won't believe Lamborghini actually sold it that way. Quattro valvole means 4 valves per cylinder in Italian. The QV in 5000 QV stands for quattro valvole, which is Italian for 4 valves. This was revolutionary for Lamborghini's V12 engine in 1985. Before the QV, all Countach engines used just 2 valves per cylinder. The addition of 4 valves per cylinder meant the 5.2-liter V12 could breathe better, rev higher, and produce significantly more power. European models with their Weber carburetors jumped to about 455 horsepower, a massive increase over the previous LP 5000S model. This 4-valve technology was cutting edge for the mid-80s, putting the Countach on par with the most advanced supercars of its era. The name itself became a badge of honor. When you said quattro valvole, everyone knew you were talking about the most powerful Countach ever made. Interestingly, Lamborghini engineers had been working on this 4-valve design for years, but it took until 1985 to perfect it for production. The extra valves also changed the engine's character completely. It revved more freely and had a distinctly different exhaust note that Countach enthusiasts can identify immediately. American Countachs lost 41 horsepower due to emissions. Here's something that still makes American Lamborghini fans wince. US spec Countach QVs were significantly less powerful than their European counterparts. While European models with Weber carburetors produced 455 horsepower, American versions had to make do with Bosch Cagetronic fuel injection to meet emission standards, dropping output to roughly 414 horsepower. That's a loss of 41 horses just to satisfy the EPA. Even more painful, only about 66 QVs ever received this fuel injection system, making them incredibly rare but ironically less desirable among collectors. The fuel injection system was actually more advanced technology than the carburetors, but it strangled the engine's performance. American buyers were essentially paying more money for less car. The irony is that the fuel injection made the cars more reliable and easier to start in cold weather, but nobody bought a Lamborghini for practicality. This power deficit became such a sore point that many American owners later converted their cars back to European spec with gray market modifications. 6 massive carburetors created a visibility nightmare. The European QV's 6 Weber 44 DCNF Downdraft carburetors weren't just for show. They were feeding beasts that required a completely redesigned engine cover. These carburetors sat so tall that Lamborghini had to create a massive hump in the engine cover to accommodate them. This hump nearly eliminated what little rear visibility the Countach had to begin with. Imagine driving a car where you literally cannot see anything behind you except a wall of aluminum and glass. The carburetor setup was so complex that synchronizing all 6 units required a specialist. Your average mechanic wouldn't even know where to start. Each carburetor had twin chokes, meaning the engine was fed by 12 individual throttle butterflies that all had to work in perfect harmony. When properly tuned, the sound of all 6 carburetors sucking air at full throttle was described by period journalists as mechanical symphony. But the maintenance was a nightmare. One carburetor out of sync and the whole engine ran rough. Many owners joked that they needed a full-time mechanic just to keep the Webers happy. Kevlar body panels made it a bulletproof supercar. While the Countach wasn't literally bulletproof, Lamborghini did use Kevlar. the same material used in bulletproof vests, for the QV's new engine cover and other body panels. This was space-age stuff in 1985. The Kevlar panels were significantly lighter than the steel panels used on earlier Countachs, helping offset the weight of the larger engine and those 6 carburetors. The material was so exotic that Lamborghini workers had to develop entirely new techniques for shaping and finishing it. The Kevlar panels also had a different texture and appearance than traditional fiberglass or aluminum, giving the QV a unique look up close. Some owners reported that the Kevlar panels were actually more resistant to stone chips and minor impacts than traditional materials. The downside? If you did manage to damage a Kevlar panel, good luck finding someone who knew how to repair it properly. Most body shops in the 80s had never even seen Kevlar, let alone worked with it. This high-tech material choice was pure Lamborghini, using military-grade materials just because they could. The widest production car tires of the 80s, the Countach QV's massive 345/35 R15 rear Pirellis, were the widest tires ever fitted to a production car at the time. To put that in perspective, these tires were wider than those on many modern supercars. The contact patch was so large that in the rain, the car would hydroplane at surprisingly low speeds. These monster tires required equally massive wheel wells, which is why the QV's rear fenders are so dramatically flared. The tires were so wide that Pirelli had to develop special molds just for Lamborghini. Finding replacement tires became a major headache for owners. You couldn't just roll into your local tire shop and ask for 345s. The wide rubber did provide incredible grip in dry conditions, but it also made the car tramline terribly on grooved highways. Parking was another adventure. Those wide tires meant the QV was several inches wider than most parking spaces were designed for. Some owners joked that they needed a commercial driver's license just to handle the width. The tire pressure was also critical. A few PSI off, and the handling changed dramatically. The optional wing killed the car's top speed. Speaking of weird facts, here's one that defied all logic. The QV's optional rear wing, which looked absolutely fantastic, actually made the car slower. Period testing showed that cars equipped with the dramatic V-shaped rear wing lost more than 10 miles per hour off their top speed. Without the wing, a QV could theoretically reach 185 miles per hour. With it, you'd be lucky to see 170. The wing created so much drag that it was essentially a very expensive air brake. But here's the crazy part. Most buyers ordered it anyway because it looked so cool. Lamborghini knew the wing hurt performance but offered it because customers demanded it. The wing wasn't even particularly effective at creating downforce at legal speeds. It was purely for show, making your $500,000 supercar slower just for aesthetics. Some owners who tracked their cars would remove the wing for speed events, then reinstall it for shows. The mounting points were so obvious that everyone knew when a wing had been removed. In the ultimate irony, wingless cars are now more valuable to collectors because they're rarer. Most buyers couldn't resist the visual drama. The gearbox lived between the seats. If you thought the Countach's gearbox was behind the engine like a normal mid-engine car, think again. The 5-speed manual transmission actually sat between the driver and passenger seats, with a shaft running through the engine's oil pan to reach the differential at the rear. This bizarre layout meant the gear lever was directly connected to the transmission with the shortest linkage possible, giving incredibly precise shifts. But it also meant the transmission tunnel was massive, making the already cramped interior even tighter. The heat from the gearbox would cook both occupants on long drives. Lamborghini engineers chose this layout to improve weight distribution, but it created some unique problems. Oil changes were complicated because you had to account for the shaft running through the sump. The clutch was also in an odd position, making replacement a nightmare that required dropping the entire engine and transmission as a unit. Passengers often complained about the heat and noise from having a gearbox inches from their hip. The setup was so unusual that many mechanics refused to work on it, afraid of reassembling it incorrectly. Geneva Motor Show debut changed supercar history. The 5000 QV made its world debut at the 1985 Geneva Motor Show, and the automotive world was never quite the same. Lamborghini's stand was mobbed with crowds trying to get a glimpse of the ultimate evolution of the Countach. The car they unveiled was finished in red with a tan interior, sitting on those massive Pirelli tires, with the optional rear wing proudly displayed. Press photos from the show reveal something interesting. Even jaded automotive journalists were slack-jawed at the QV's presence. This wasn't just another Countach update. It was a statement that Lamborghini could still push boundaries. The Geneva show car was actually a pre-production prototype, and eagle-eyed observers noticed several details that would change for production models. Orders reportedly started flowing in before the show even ended, with wealthy collectors fighting over early build slots. The QV's Geneva debut overshadowed several other significant launches, including updated Ferraris and Porsches. One journalist wrote that standing next to the QV made every other car look suddenly ordinary. The show car toured the world after Geneva, building hype for what would become the most desirable Countach variant. Only 610 QVs exist in the world. Think Lamborghinis are rare? The QV takes exclusivity to another level. Total production from 1985 through 1988 was around 610 cars, making it scarcer than many limited edition supercars. To put that in perspective, Ferrari made more F40s than Lamborghini made QVs. Of those 610, the vast majority went to Europe and the Middle East. The United States, despite being Lamborghini's largest market, received a relatively small allocation due to those emissions requirements. This scarcity has made QVs incredibly valuable today. But here's what's really wild. Nobody knows exactly how many survive. Countachs were driven hard, crashed often, and sometimes abandoned when repair costs exceeded the car's value in the 90s. Estimates suggest maybe 400 still exist in running condition. The QV registry tries to track them all, but cars keep surfacing in barns and warehouses decades later. Each discovery makes headlines in the Lamborghini community. The low production numbers weren't intentional. Lamborghini could have sold more, but building each QV required hundreds of hours of hand labor. The factory in Sant'Agata was only capable of producing about 3 cars per week at maximum capacity. Have you ever seen one of these magnificent beasts in person? The way that engine cover bulges up behind you is something photos can't capture. Let me know in the comments if you've spotted a QV in the wild. They're getting rarer every year. The sticker price would make you faint. In the mid-80s, a new Countach QV carried a price tag around $118,000. Adjusted for inflation, that's over $300,000 in today's money. But the sticker price was just the beginning. Options could easily add another $20,000 or $30,000. That rear wing everyone wanted? $5,000. Special paint? Another $5,000. The upgraded sound system that you couldn't hear over the engine anyway? $3,000. Lamborghini knew their customers had deep pockets and priced accordingly. Insurance was another shock. Some companies simply refused to cover them. Those that did charged premiums that could buy a nice sedan every year. Then there was maintenance. A major service could cost $10,000 in 1980s money. One owner famously said his QV cost him $1,000 every time he turned the key. But here's the kicker. Nobody cared about the cost. If you had to ask how much it cost to run, you couldn't afford it anyway. The QV was never about value. It was about owning the most outrageous car money could buy. Weight varied by over 300 pounds. Depending on specification, a QV could weigh anywhere from 3,285 pounds to 3,600 pounds. That's a massive variance for what was supposedly the same car. The difference came down to options and market specifications. European cars with carburetors were lighter than U.S. fuel-injected models. Cars with air conditioning added significant weight. The sound deadening required for some markets packed on pounds. Even the wheels made a difference. The gorgeous OZ racing wheels were lighter than the standard units. This weight variance significantly affected performance. A lightweight European spec car without options was a completely different animal than a fully loaded U.S. version. Magazine test results varied wildly because they were essentially testing different cars. Some owners went to extreme lengths to reduce weight, removing spare tires, tools, and even passenger seats. The obsession with weight led to some creative solutions. One owner replaced his glass windows with Lexan, saving nearly 50 pounds. Another had carbon fiber panels made to replace the steel doors. These modifications often cost more than the car's original price, but in the world of QV ownership, rational thinking didn't apply. 0 to 60 in the mid-4s was hypercar territory. Factory figures claimed the QV could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in the mid-4-second range. In 1985, that was borderline unbelievable. Most sports cars of the era needed 6 or 7 seconds to reach 60. The QV's acceleration was so violent that first-time passengers often screamed involuntarily. The combination of 455 horsepower and those massive rear tires created a launch experience unlike anything else. But here's the catch. Achieving those numbers required perfect conditions and an expert driver. The clutch was heavy and unforgiving. Too much throttle and you'd spin those expensive Pirellis into smoke. Too little and you'd bog the engine. The gearbox required perfectly timed shifts. Miss a gear at full throttle and you'd over-rev the engine catastrophically. Magazine testers often couldn't match factory claims, leading to accusations that Lamborghini was optimistic with their numbers. The reality was that the QV required skill to extract its performance. In the hands of an expert, it was devastatingly quick. In the hands of an amateur, it was merely fast. This separated the real drivers from the posers. Anyone could buy a QV, but not everyone could drive one properly. The V12 engine was a work of art. The 5,167cc V12 wasn't just an engine, it was a masterpiece of Italian engineering. With an 85.5mm bore and 75mm stroke, it was over square for high revving capability. The 8-to-1 compression ratio was conservative by modern standards, but allowed the engine to run on the lower octane fuel available in some markets. Each cylinder bank had its own camshaft operating those 4 valves per cylinder. The valve timing was aggressive enough that the engine had a lumpy idle that shook the whole car. At full throttle, all 12 cylinders singing in harmony created a sound that's been described as tearing silk or angry opera. The engine bay was so tightly packaged that major service required removing the entire powertrain. Spark plug changes were a gymnastic exercise. But when running right, this engine was sublime. It pulled strongly from 3,000 RPM all the way to the 7,000 RPM red line. The power delivery was linear and predictable, unlike the turbo cars of the era. Oil consumption was considered normal. A quart every 1,000 miles wasn't unusual. The cooling system was marginal at best, requiring vigilant monitoring in traffic. Euro cars made more power, and torquey European specification QVs with their Weber carburetors were rated at 455 brake horsepower at 7,000 RPM and 340 pound-feet of torque at 5,200 RPM. These numbers made the QV one of the most powerful production cars in the world. The power advantage over U.S. cars wasn't just on paper. European QVs felt noticeably faster in real-world driving. The carburetor setup allowed for more aggressive tuning and better breathing at high RPM. The torque curve was also fatter in the mid-range, making the car more responsive in normal driving. But those Webers required constant attention. Changes in altitude or temperature required rejetting. Cold starts were an adventure, pumping the throttle just right to get all 6 carburetors primed without flooding the engine. Once warm, though, the throttle response was instantaneous. There was no lag, no hesitation, just immediate violent acceleration. European owners loved to embarrass Porsche turbo drivers who expected their boost to give them an advantage. The naturally aspirated QV would pull away smoothly while the Porsche was still waiting for boost. This immediate response made the QV particularly effective on twisty roads where throttle modulation was critical. The signature parking maneuver was sitting on the door sill. Here's one of the weirdest facts about QV ownership. The standard reversing procedure involved opening the door and sitting on the sill. That massive carburetor bulge in the engine cover blocked approximately 98% of the rear view. The inside rear view mirror was essentially decorative. The side mirrors were too small and poorly positioned to help much, so owners developed this signature move. Pop the scissor door, swing your legs out, sit on the wide door sill, and crane your neck around to see where you're going. It looked ridiculous, but it worked. Valet parkers were terrified of QVs for this reason. One wrong move while reversing, and you'd crunch that expensive Kevlar bodywork. Some owners installed aftermarket cameras, but 1980s camera technology was primitive. The image quality was so poor it barely helped. Parking sensors didn't exist yet. You either mastered the door sill technique or you didn't reverse at all. Many owners simply refused to parallel park, instead walking blocks from a safe spot. The lucky ones had drivers who handled the parking duties. This visibility issue became such a defining characteristic that it's now part of the Countach mystique. Downdraft carburetors were a Countach first. The switch from side draft to downdraft carburetors on the QV was revolutionary for the Countach line. Previous models used side draft Webers that sat low in the engine bay. The downdraft design fed fuel and air straight down into the engine, improving mixture distribution and cooling. This configuration required completely redesigning the intake manifold and creating that distinctive engine cover bulge. But the benefits were worth it. The downdraft setup provided better fuel atomization and more even cylinder filling. It also moved the carburetors up and away from the engine's heat, reducing fuel vaporization problems that plagued earlier cars. The coolant improvement was significant. Earlier Countachs suffered from heat soak in traffic, causing the fuel in the carburetors to boil. The QV's downdraft design with its raised position and better airflow largely solved this issue. Mechanics familiar with earlier Countachs had to relearn their craft for the QV. The carburetor synchronization procedure was completely different. Access was actually better in some ways despite the height. The downdraft design became so successful that Lamborghini considered retrofitting it to earlier cars, but the cost was prohibitive. Fuel delivery combined electric pumps with mechanical precision. The QV's fuel system was a complex dance between modern and traditional technology. An electric fuel pump fed those 6 hungry Webers on European cars, while a mechanical pump served as backup. This dual pump system was Lamborghini's insurance against the electric pump failing and leaving you stranded. The fuel lines had to be precisely routed to ensure equal pressure to all 6 carburetors. Any variation and the engine would run rough. US cars with Bosch Cagetronic injection used a different approach. The continuous injection system required extremely high fuel pressure and precise metering. The fuel distributor was a mechanical marvel that split fuel flow to 12 injectors based on airflow. Both systems were temperamental in their own ways. The carbureted cars required frequent adjustment, but were simpler to diagnose. The injected cars ran more consistently, but were nightmares when something went wrong. Few mechanics understood Cagetronic, and fewer still wanted to work on it. Fuel quality was critical for both systems. Bad gas would clog the tiny passages in the Webers or confuse the injection system. Many owners learned to be very selective about where they bought fuel, avoiding bargain stations entirely. Tire technology evolved during the QV's production run. When the QV launched, it rolled on Pirelli P7 tires. By the end of production, buyers could specify the new P0 rubber. This represented a quantum leap in tire technology. The P7 was a good tire for its time, but the P0 was revolutionary. It offered better grip, improved wet weather performance, and longer life. The compound was softer, providing more mechanical grip, while the construction was stiffer for better steering response. But here's the interesting part. Not everyone preferred the P0s. Some purists felt they made the car too easy to drive, removing some of the challenge that made the Countach experience unique. The P7's tendency to break away progressively was replaced by the P0's higher limits but more abrupt breakaway. This tire evolution highlighted how quickly automotive technology was advancing in the 80s. A tire that was state-of-the-art in 1985 was obsolete by 1988. Modern owners face a dilemma: period-correct P7s for authenticity or modern rubber for safety and performance. Many choose modern tires that look similar to the originals but offer vastly superior performance. The 345 section width is still impressive today, providing a massive contact patch that helps put the V12's power to the ground. Bertone design and Sant'Agata craftsmanship created magic. Every QV was shaped by Bertone's designers and hand-built at Lamborghini's Sant'Agata factory. This combination of Italian design flair and craftsmanship created something special. Marcello Gandini's original Countach design was updated for the QV with subtle but important changes. The body panels were hand-formed by craftsmen who've been building Lamborghinis for decades. Each car took hundreds of hours to assemble. The paint was applied in multiple coats, hand-sanded between each layer. The interior leather was cut and sewn by artisans who treated each hide like a work of art. This handmade quality meant no two QVs were exactly alike. Panel gaps varied, paint thickness wasn't uniform, and interior pieces might fit differently from car to car. But this wasn't seen as a flaw. It was proof that your Lamborghini was built by humans, not robots. Quality control was a relative term. Sometimes switches didn't work, gauges read incorrectly, or trim pieces fell off. Owners accepted these quirks as part of the experience. You didn't buy a QV expecting Toyota reliability. The build quality improved throughout the production run as workers refined their techniques. Later QVs are generally better assembled than early examples. Magazine test results varied wildly. Period magazines couldn't agree on the QV's performance figures. Some recorded top speeds of 166 miles per hour with the wing, while others claimed nearly 180 without it. The confusion stemmed from several factors. Different specification cars performed differently. Test conditions varied dramatically. Driver skill played a huge role. Some magazines tested pre-production cars that weren't representative of customer vehicles. The variation in results became a running joke in the automotive press. One magazine would proclaim the QV the fastest car in the world, while another would say it was slower than a Ferrari Testarossa. Acceleration figures were equally scattered. Some testers achieved 4.2 seconds to 60, others needed 5.5. The truth was that every QV was slightly different, and extracting maximum performance required specific conditions and considerable skill. Modern retrospective testing with consistent methodology shows the QV was legitimately quick for its era. But the wild variations in period tests added to the car's mystique. Nobody knew exactly how fast their QV was compared to others, leading to endless bench racing arguments. This uncertainty was part of the charm. Your QV might be the fast one or it might not. The only way to find out was to drive it like Lamborghini intended. And now, the moment you've been waiting for, the absolute weirdest fact about the 1985 Lamborghini Countach 5000 QV. Lamborghini secretly designed the car to be impossible to drive slowly. Here's the shocking truth that Lamborghini never advertised. The QV was engineered to be literally undrivable at normal speeds. The clutch was so heavy and abrupt that smooth starts in traffic were nearly impossible. The engine would buck and stall below 2,000 RPM. The cooling system only worked properly at speed, meaning the temperature gauge would climb dangerously in traffic. The gearbox required deliberate, forceful shifts that made gentle driving impossible. The steering was so heavy at low speeds that three-point turns required a gym membership. But here's the genius part. Above 50 miles per hour, everything transformed. The clutch became manageable, the engine smoothed out, the cooling system worked perfectly, the steering lightened up, and the gearbox snicked through gears like butter. Lamborghini's engineers didn't want the QV driven like a normal car. They designed it to punish anyone who tried to baby it. The message was clear. If you're not driving it hard, you shouldn't be driving it at all. This wasn't a flaw, it was philosophy engineered into metal. The QV demanded commitment. It forced owners to drive it the way a supercar should be driven, fast, hard, and without apology. Many owners gave up, selling their QVs after discovering they couldn't use them for dinner runs. But those who understood the car's nature learned to love this characteristic. The QV taught you to be a better, more committed driver, or it sent you back to your Mercedes. That's all for today, folks. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button so you don't miss the next one. See you there.